Good morning. Great to be together again, and we certainly have a lot to be thankful for. A great weekend and a memorial service on Saturday, and our teens car wash on Saturday, and of course a full day on Sunday. And yesterday, just getting the week going. I'm sure there's a lot of tired bodies out there. We just think about our teenagers and the world that they live in, and our senior class left yesterday early in the morning. I think 5 o'clock or something. They took off, and Josh and Carly, our youth director, and his wife took the young people to Florida, looking for a less communist place to go, and so they're off, and it's a full week here, and we're coming into some busy days. We have the end of school. Of course, this is Mother's Day. I hope you'll work at getting some visitors to church on Mother's Day. And just want to remind you, we're not just wanting visitors in church. We want people saved. And to just shuffle Christians back and forth it's really not accomplishing anything for the eternal good of God. We want people to trust Christ, and then we want Christians to grow. And if someone's out of church, we need them in church. Maybe something will click. We could get them to stay. Sunday I think we had 5 first-time visitors Sunday night. Of course, we had visitors in the morning, but people are the tool in the hands of God. And sometimes I was reading Isaiah this week, I've been reading the early chapters of Isaiah. God talks about using different nations, even wicked nations, as his rod, and he'll use whatever he wants. But when it comes to the work of God and the gospel, it's us. It's just old sinful flesh. And looking at you, having anything stuck in my pocket. I shaved this morning. But all God has to work with is us. And so when a Christian's out of church, they're out of his reach in the sense of nursery workers, Sunday school teachers, choir, orchestra, soul winning, bus work, rest home, jails. The ministry of outreach with the gospel and the ministry of ministering to our people, it's all people that do it. And the pastor's just kind of the moderator. I just kind of guide the ship. The work's done by the crew, and it's a great thing. And so I hope you will encourage people to come. Now, 2 weeks away, we have a picnic on Saturday, the Saturday after Mother's Day. So a week from this Saturday, and we just want to invite everybody up for a spring picnic. We got 3 picnics planned. One Saturday after Mother's Day, one on Monday of Memorial Day. We'll have our big Memorial Day service out of the football field, and then we'll get go home and change whatever, and we're just gonna have a picnic here, barbecue. And on Memorial Day, we're gonna have our friend that's got a taco truck come, and he'll just be here for several hours, and you can come and order whatever you want whenever you want. He's got a big menu, but he'll just be on the property, or you could bring your own food and barbecue it, or bring your own, order Domino's pizza or whatever you want. But that'll be the second picnic, Memorial Day. And then 4th of July is on a Sunday. So the 3rd of July, we're having a picnic on Saturday. And that's just 3 early summer picnics, just to say God's good, everything's all right. And we just want to keep busy for the Lord. And so I hope you'll plan on hanging out with us and enjoying some games, some fellowship, and some food. And maybe if you're a good cook, sharing some food. I've got a couple of college reference letters here. Young people heading off to Bible college want me to fill out a reference form. One of them for sure is all of her teen years wanted to be in the mission field, going somewhere. The other one's just looking for God's direction, and probably both of them looking for a guy, which is a good choice. I was thinking about how God works in our world and works around us, and sometimes things look grim. And I was reading a little bit of the history of fundamental Christianity in America, and reading about the post-Civil War time. Now, remember, 1770s, we had a major battle for independence from England, 1776 in that era. So just 30 years later, we had the War of 1812. And so our country is just kind of becoming a country, and we're in another battle. And it's like there's a war going on pretty regular, and difficult days for our country. So we get up to the mid 1800s. Our country is just 100 years old, 1860, 1870, and we have the Civil War. And what a grievous time in our country's history, where we killed more of our own than have been killed in other wars. And the evil people across the world that killed a bunch of our soldiers, we killed more of our own soldiers at the Civil War. And it's just a tragedy, the battles that were going on. I want to focus for a minute or two on the late 1800s, and I would like to encourage you and remind you where we are in this situation. I'm just going to take a little bit of history, and I'm not the brain in all this stuff, but I do read, and I do my best to learn. In that era of late 1800s, starting 1870, the last 30 years or so, there was a building up of some things, building ready to burst. Some things were getting ready to happen, and the religious world had been infiltrated by a post-millennial doctrine. Now, that's an idea that mankind's going to get better and better and better, and that we're going to find ourselves so good that Jesus will just come back and say, that's an awesome place, I want to come rule. And that's a ridiculous thing, because men aren't getting better and better. They're really a mess. And but that idea was creeping into a lot of our churches. They call it a post-millennialism. We would be pre-millennial in our views. And then there was the Reconstruction, which was the federal government putting troops and money to help rebuild a lot of that was devastated in the South. Wonderful people and homes and industries were destroyed. And they called it, there's 12 years of Reconstruction going on. Rutherford Hayes was trying to clean up some of the problems that were in Washington that he inherited from President Grant, according to a lot of people. Everybody's political views different. The people out west had started to recover. They'd gone through a terrible time of pestilence, just the difficulties in the farming industry, and then there's a lot of industry coming. That 1873, there's a big panic and a mess going on. Unions were starting to form with the promise of some order and rights for the employee. There was inventions going on. George Sheldon was getting near developing the horseless carriage. Edison received 1878 the patent for the phonograph. Alexander Graham Bell received a patent for the telephone or something, the early telephone. Darwin, though, in the day when America was kind of coming around, and there was also Darwinism was being introduced, and rationalism, a lot of wrong ideas about God is not as important as man, and a lot of messed up ideas were coming. See, the 1870s were bringing an awareness that we need God. The country was hurting, the politics were a mess, the economy was hurting, and people were aware. And this is the era when Dwight Moody and some great evangelists were early in their ministry, and not just them, there were others. And there are some great revivals going on, some churches being revived, dead churches realizing we need the Lord. People that were not reading their Bible, they were just casual church attenders, were realizing we need a relationship we need a personal relationship with God. And so over in England, Charles Spurgeon, America, Dwight Moody, and then all the attached men that worked in that era. And so we're approaching the end of the 19th century, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. And it's interesting how the devil sees what's going on. He knows things that are going on. And so right along in here, Mary Baker Eddy comes along and invents Christian Science, that we're really not here at all. We're only a figment of our own imagination. That's a ridiculous idea. But there's more in that same area. Mary Baker, Glover, Patterson, Eddy, and Christian Science, the Charles Russell and others started the Jehovah's Witness, and they declared that the worlds, that the Lord came back in 1874, and that the millennial world, the millennial dawn of a new era was upon them, And it was all set up for 1914. They said in 1914 Jesus is going to set up his earthly kingdom, that he's already back on the planet, but he's just checking things out. And just a big difficult time in America. And but in the midst of all this, the Mormon Joseph Smith brought up Mormonism. Sung Young Moon brought the Moonies in that same, this 1870 to 1900 gave us Christian Science, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Moonies, and a couple of other cults. And the devil saw the American people drawing toward God, I think. But as there was some great revivals and some awakenings, there was also some great difficulty. And coming out of a war, and again, we're not very far. The 1880, we're starting to rebuild from a civil war. In 1890, there's still struggles going on, and then we're past 1900, and along comes World War I, and then so mankind's been a mess and a lot of needs. And today I wanted to mention just several verses about all this, because I want to fix things. I want to help. I want to be an encouragement. I want to see people do well. I want to see people saved and baptized and reading their Bibles and growing as Christians and serving God. But also I want to see people do well on earth. I want our country to do well. I've been to the Philippines on many occasions, and I preach in the schools, and I look at the sea of faces, and I think, if these kids could just draw near to God and secure the mercy of God, what a wonderful place. What a place to have the touch of God right in the middle of the South Pacific, and to have the blessings. I want that country to prosper. I've been down in Mexico for all their natural resources and for all of their diligence and hardworking people, and yet how little earthly prosperity they have, and what a hard world they live in, and it grieves me. And I'm not living in the Philippines or living in Mexico, but those people matter, and I want people to do well. I look at our young people. On occasion, some of our young people will get out of church, and I grieve for them. I think I want them to do well. I want them to marry well. I want them to have good jobs, and I want them in church. I want them to love God. But while we're on earth, Jesus said, he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips, they speak no guile. So it's nothing wrong with loving life and seeing good days. And that was James who wrote it, the Lord's word. But if we want to love life, I want our young people to love life. I don't want us to hate life. Now, you get older, your body gets you to hate life some days. I know some of you, your aches and pains frustrate you so much, and your head wants to be busy, and your body wants to go back to bed. But all that being said, I want us all to remember that this world has got plenty of garbage thrown at us, and it's not new. The mess in Washington is not the first time Washington has been in a mess, and the economic or political or labor union type things, those aren't new. And we may have technology that's new, but we still got old sinners running it. And most important, we've got a good God who oversees things. I want to give you just a thought or two. When the battles come, so often we can let the battle overwhelm us, when we should be focused on the job in front of us. And the big difficulties of the world and global pandemics or whatever it might be. And that's not our focus, because we can't fix that anyway. Our focus is to fix our today, to fix our little circle of the world where we live, this little corner of this globe. And over in Ecclesiastes, chapter 12 and verse 13 says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. The whole duty of man, fear God and keep his commandments. It's not my job to fix Washington. Now, if I end up, God moved me into a political world, and I had to put a wetsuit and mask and tanks on to swim the swamp, and maybe that was God's calling on my life, maybe then it would be my job. But after watching how President Trump did, I don't want any part of the swamp, and I'd blow that swamp up rather than swim through it. But let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Ecclesiastes 12:13. Fear God and keep his commandments. My job to walk in the fear of God, to do right today, and to keep his commandments. And has to do with my job, my money, my neighborhood, my wife, my children, my family, relations. I don't have to change global warming, and nobody's touching global warming. There's no human being going to fix global warming. The country's had a cold and ice ages and hot times. It's just a reality. You've all seen pictures of the changes in Africa. We've seen it here. But even if it was not my job to fear God and keep his commandments. Over in Luke chapter 17 is a great passage. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Luke chapter 17. I start thinking about what it is, excuse me, what God wants us to do. In Luke chapter 17, he said, which of you have a servant plowing or feeding cattle will say to him by and by when he's come in from the field, go and sit down to meat, or to go sitting down to eat. You're the hired help out there on the ranch. You've been taking care of cattle and whatever, or the farm. No, he said, rather, you're going to say, make ready where I may eat, I may sup, and gird thyself and serve me until I have eaten and drunken, and afterward thou shalt eat and drink. Doth he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded him? I throw not. So likewise ye, when ye shall have done all those things which are commanded you, say we are unprofitable servants, we have done that which was our duty to do. Now, there's more in this context than I have time to talk about. But the bottom line is this. I've got a job to do. And if I'm branding cattle, that's my job. If I'm running a combine, harvesting grain, that's my job. And when I come in, if my job is to take care of the kitchen and cook for the people around there, that's my job. It's my duty. We've done that which is our duty to do. And there are things that are our duty. And we can get so busy trying to fix the world and try and solve the global this and solve the national that. You know, how many different people have come in and out of the White House and said we're going to fix the national debt, we're going to balance the budget and all this stuff. And all I see is every year we're another gazillion dollars in the hole. And what a mess. We can gripe about China all we want, but I think they own most of the bonds or stocks or whatever in America. But I'm not even worried about China. I'm worried about God. If I can get God involved, if I can please God in my daily life, if I can just draw near to him, see, God's going to take care of us. The story of Jehoiachin, there's Jehoiakim and Jehoiachin, two different kings in Israel. Jehoiachin in 2 Kings 25, he was captured, carried away to Babylon, pretty difficult straits he was in, but God touched the king's heart. And the king, it says he lifted up his head in 2 Kings 25. He lifted up the head. That doesn't mean he pulled it off his shoulder. It means he brought him out of prison. And he set him at his own table. And for the rest of his life, and there's a neat little phrase here, and you that are familiar with old books, I wish I could think of the name of the author, but a good, clean author that's written lots of books. She wrote a book called A Daily Rate. And the king gave Jehoiachin a daily rate from the king's table. In other words, a set measure every day the king provided for Jehoiachin all the rest of his life. Now, his country had gotten in trouble and been crushed, and he was living in a foreign land. But you know what? God can lift you up in a difficult place, and God can put you in the right place. And he did it with Joseph, did it with Daniel, and did it with many others, did it with Nehemiah. And so, you know, that's why Jesus said, give us this day our daily bread. And don't most of us, we worry about our tomorrow, when today things are fine. And I'm not saying we should ignore tomorrow, but Jesus did say, sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Take no thought for the morrow. The morrow will take thought for the things of itself. So we're in this world, and it is a difficult world around us, but our job is to focus on being near to God, because God will bless us right where we are, and God will sustain us where we are. God will give us help and encouragement where we are. And could I say that Patty Hatch went to heaven a few weeks ago, had her memorial this last week, but you know, the last days of her life, she was as safe in the hands of Jesus as she was when she was the vibrant, running night and day, energy-filled 20, 30, 40-year-old. She wasn't out of the hand of God. We're all living in a corrupt body. This body is rotten. It's a carbon-based, deteriorating piece of organic junk. Somebody said about $1.98 worth of chemicals and some water, and it's just a mess. It's what we are. And this old body's going to crumble. And I'm not looking forward to it. I'm more careful going up and down stairs, and I'm careful. I don't jump out of my pickup anymore. I sit down the tailgate and slip out, and his knees, for me, for some of you, it's half the parts of your body hurt or don't work, but that's all right. God knows where we're going, and God's moved us along. Hasn't God been good to us? Haven't we had good friends and good family and good church, and God's blessed us with home and car and extras? Hasn't He been good? I don't know anything else I want, but I would like to get some things for my kids. I'd like to get some things to share to look after my family. And there's little things. I've got friends. I've got something this morning. I was looking at the internet looking for something. I know somebody who likes something very unusual. He'd never buy it for himself. And I thought, if I had the money and I could find the right one, I'd buy that for him if I had the money. But I can at least look. But I don't. There's nothing I want. And I just know God's been so good to me. And if I hurt, I'm not going to want to hurt, obviously. But this, in Acts chapter 7, Stephen, it's his first and last sermon. And in one little phrase in there, he said, David, after that he had served his own generation by the will of God, fell on sleep. David served his generation. Early in David's life, he was fighting for King Saul, fighting the Philistines, killing Goliath. Later in his young life, he was running from King Saul, and he was fighting to survive out in the wilderness. Well, then Saul and Jonathan died. David's the king. Now he's fighting to subdue the kingdom, put everything in order, and he secures this great kingdom. And then late in life, he's fighting an old rotten body that's given out on him and couldn't stay warm, and he fell asleep. After that, and here's the phrase, after that he'd served his own generation by the will of God. I think, that's what I want to do. That's what I want us to do. Let's just serve our generation. Let's be a blessing to our world. Whether it be in a choir or teach Sunday school or using our money to be a blessing to others who are in need, using our abilities to help those who need something. You think how valuable a mechanic is. In our church, really not in our church now, but through all these 39 years of ministry, God's always given me a mechanic to help with my car. It's so funny. I worked on cars. I grew up, my dad taught me a little bit about cars, and this is all pre-electronics and pre-computers, but I could do most basic things with a car. And I get here and meet Bill and Sherry Pattison, and what good friends they were. And they're still very dear to us because of health. They don't get out hardly ever, but they're loved. I drive by and pray by their house and pray for them. And their kids are in our church and very integral part of our ministry. But Bill just kind of adopted my car. He started coming over and picking it up and working on it. And then it seemed like when Bill got busy or health or whatever kept him, then it was another person. In all these years, God's given us mechanics that looked after my car. What a blessing a mechanic is. You might think, wow, I'm just a mechanic. Well, I'll tell you, when somebody's car broke down, you're awesome. And serve our own generation by the will of God. And David just served. And you know what? It ought to be our desire. Like the Apostle Paul in Philippians, if you want to look there, Philippians chapter 4, and I'll read you a verse. The Apostle Paul's in jail. Now, he's in Rome. He's far from home. He's not even in his own country. And what's worse than being in prison? Being in prison in another country. And so he's in prison in another country, in Rome. But he's in the will of God. He's dead center in the will of God. He's been accused. He's been slandered. He's been lied about. All of Asia, it says, had turned against him. And he'd had a lot of Christian brethren turn on him. And here he sits in jail, and Onesiphorus and several others along the way became just beloved to Paul as they came and sought him out and helped him, brought him some clothing when it was cold, brought him the scriptures, copies of the scriptures, and just, they were a blessing to him. But there Paul is in jail. But you know what? He could spend his life being frustrated he's in jail, or he could serve God in jail. And that's what Philippians 4:22 tells us. He says in verse 22, all the saints salute you, chiefly they that are of Caesar's household. Now he was in Caesar's jail. We could go into it and talk more about it and show you some more verses on it, but the bottom line is he's sitting with these jailers all day long, leading them to Christ. Well, the shift change, he leads them to Christ. Shift change, leads them to Christ. Now he's teaching them the Bible. They're bringing people in, and for a long time, if you read the last chapter of the book of Acts, Paul was in jail, and he was allowed to have visitors. And so people in groups are coming. He's teaching them the Bible. They couldn't get out. At one point in the end of the book of Acts, Paul was in jail, but he was in his own rented house. They said, well, you don't need to be in jail now. You're still a prisoner. You got to stay with a guard. But you can rent that little 2-bedroom apartment down the road or that little cottage by the ocean. And so for some of this time, Paul's in his own rented house, and groups of Jewish people, because Jewish people scattered around the world, they're coming to hear this great teacher of the Bible and hear about the gospel, and new converts are coming. And, Paul could have been frustrated that he was in jail, but instead he was busy telling people about the good news, and he was serving his own generation. Today, let's just live for God. Let's do the right thing. Micah 6:8 gives us our marching orders. He has shown thee, O man, what is good. What doth the Lord require of thee? To do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with God. That goes along with that over where we started, Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God, keep his commandments. That's the whole duty of man. Let's do our duty today. Now, there's some problems I can't solve. There's some problems I brought to God and I've dumped before him. And I said, you made the stars and the moon and the sun in a day. You could fix this right now. And he didn't. And, God knows what's going on. He knows what he wants fixed and what he doesn't want fixed. So let's step back and let's do the thing God has for us today. And let's do it well. Let's love people. Let's be a help. Let's walk with God. Read our Bible. Take some time to pray. Pray for the week ahead. Pray for the ministry. Pray for our country. Pray for churches across the land. Pray for our schools. What a mess our poor schools are in. And some really good students, some really good teachers in a very mixed up, confused situation. Pray that God would bless our schools, our young people in America. Pray there'd be a revival, that God would bring a revival. See, back there where I started, post-Civil War, there was a brokenness in our country. And yet there was a great revival that followed. And over in the early 1900s, Billy Sunday, Bob Jones Sr., not long after Billy Graham, there's some great, Sam Jones, some great evangelists came along. There's always a chance for God to do his work. Oh, pray. Pray for your country. And let's pray he comes. I'm looking forward to him coming. Today would be a good day. So have a good day. And look forward to joining with you tomorrow for a few minutes.